Hello, and thank you for viewing this video segment titled Ensuring Your Cloud is Available and Resilient. I'm Lynda Stadtmueller, Program Manager for Business Communication Services at Frost Sullivan, and I'll be your host today. This is our second video in a three-part series on cloud computing featuring our panel of IBM cloud leaders. Rick Telford, Vice President, IBM Cloud Services, Rich Cocchiara, Distinguished Engineer and Chief Technology Officer for Business Continuity and Resilience Services, and Chris Lovejoy, Vice President, IBM Security Strategy. We hope you find this discussion engaging and relevant, and we encourage you to view the other two videos in the series. Video 1 is Getting Started with Cloud Computing, Choosing the Right Workload to Put into a Cloud Environment, and Video 3, Managing Security in the Cloud. All right. Let's get started. Rich, how do you address concerns about availability in cloud computing, particularly in a public cloud environment, concerns that could be preventing enterprises from adopting cloud computing?
Great question, and this question comes up quite a bit. First of all, let's talk about the different types of cloud computing environments that we might have. You do have public, you have hybrid, and you have private. Okay, we'll start with private first, because that's really within the enterprise itself. The same type of availability issues that you would have if you were non-cloud apply to a private cloud. You do need to take a look at your overall infrastructure. You need to take a look at how your architecture is designed. And then you need to take a look at how you are providing your own backup and recovery services, as well as your failover and availability services. Those are the kinds of things that you do with private cloud. As you move towards public cloud, and you're utilizing something like a hybrid cloud, you're now beginning to incorporate your cloud vendors' architecture into what you're doing. One of the things I recommend to my clients is first get a handle on their own infrastructure and then incorporate that architecture from the cloud provider and create a combined architecture. So you need to understand the cloud provider's overall availability architecture. Do they have the robustness that you're looking for? Do they have the backup and recovery necessary to ensure the continuity of your data, continuity of your operations? Do they have the archiving capability to ensure that your data is going to be protected and secured over long periods of time? And then finally, do you have the failover capabilities to ensure that if something goes wrong, I'm not going to be without my services, okay, when you've got a problem? So what I tell clients is use the same type of approach that you would use internally with your cloud provider. Now, ideally, when you've got that hybrid cloud working, where you're taking advantage of not only your own infrastructure, but that of a cloud provider, you're linking the two of them together. And if you do that, hopefully what you're going to get is a higher level of availability than you had even before, because you're taking advantage of the cloud provider's abilities to distribute the risk that you might have otherwise if you were to do it only on your own.
There is an irony to this, though. And the irony from a security and compliance perspective is that data persistence, or the availability of data after the contract is terminated, becomes problematic for our customers. What they tend to worry about is the fact that in a cloud environment, what tends to happen is that data assets are replicated. Data assets are stored ubiquitously. And when the contract terminates, it's very hard to assure that the data has actually been deleted. In fact, even though it's been deleted, it's possible that the hardware has not been wiped. And in a shared environment, you realize you can't just wipe out a hard drive, because the reality is multiple customers are sharing that same drive. Alternatively, you're just, reusing that hardware over and over again. So that question of data persistence is an important one for customers to answer, and that must be answered as part of this SLA. And so a very explicit terms regarding data deletion really needs to be explicitly rendered within that contract. The second thing that customers worry about is accessibility to the service and the ability to audit sort of post facto what's happened with that service once the contract has been terminated. So again, from a security and compliance perspective, the fact that there is so much persistence actually works, against one.
Rich, Chris mentioned SLAs. How do you approach service level agreements? Is it different or similar to the way they've been developed in the past?
It is different, and Chris brings up a really good point about the service level agreements and what you have to include. Now, in the past, most of the companies that we have dealt with have service level agreements, particularly when it comes to their own internal services that they're providing to their end users. With use of a cloud provider, such as IBM, you've got to incorporate the service levels that the cloud provider can give you into your own internal service level agreements, but there are variables that are outside the control of the individual company and outside the control even of the cloud provider. You're dealing with a network. And so part of the service level agreement is incorporating not only what you know, but also the variables that you might not have control over that you're going to have to be consequently either mitigated or you're going to have to accept them. So when I tell customers putting together an SLA, when I tell them, look, you're going to create an SLA utilizing a cloud provider, take into account that there are certain things that you cannot control. So don't create an SLA that's so tight that basically you have no chance but to fail.
The only thing I would add to that, Rich, is the fact that not all workloads are created equal, right? And so one of the preliminary pieces of work that we always talk to our clients about is tiering your application space, understanding what your tier 1 mission critical applications and the SLA associated with that, all the way down to a tier 4 workload, which may be, development and test or some pre-production workload or something like that. There'll be SLAs associated with each of those tiers. That way, when you're going to a cloud provider, you're comparing apples to apples, and you shouldn't settle for less than what you have internally for that tier. So that may, if your cloud providers can't provide, what you're looking for in an SLA, that may push you more towards moving, say, tier 4 workloads first because they can meet those SLAs, and then over time, as SLAs from cloud providers, improve, you can move up. Or it gives you a good way to discount certain public cloud service providers if they can't meet the service level agreements that you have.
Rich, I want to ask about cost trade-offs associated with resilience in the cloud. Does a lack of built-in resilience make the cloud less appealing for customers who would have to pay extra to make sure their cloud is resilient?
Well, I don't necessarily agree that a cloud is less resilient. A cloud can be designed in a number of different ways. You can make it as resilient as you want. What I tell clients is, just as Rick said, start to tier your workload. Determine the level of risk you're willing to take. I think that's a benefit of cloud, is the fact that clients now get to choose. One size does not fit all. And so what I tell clients is that if you've got certain workload that is absolutely critical to you, you're going to want to have the most robust architecture possible. You're going to want to ensure that you've got backup, you've got recovery, you've got redundancy. But if you've got certain workload that can withstand more risk, why pay for it? Why pay for more risk? So I don't agree that the clouds are less resilient. I think that the benefit of cloud is it gives our clients the ability to choose the level of resilience they want, as opposed to, as I said, one size fits all. So for clients that I'm dealing with right now, I typically sit down with them, determine their level of risk, and then move forward with designing an architecture for them and their cloud that makes sense for them. And they really like the fact that they're not being forced to pay for a very high level of resilience for certain workloads that may not be so critical. And that's a real benefit, I think, that cloud brings to the table that we may not have had before.
Yeah, I think that excellent point. And I think that a lot of what you're saying applies to sort of the security and compliance world as well. If you think about sort of what's the problem from a technology perspective within many enterprises today, what we face in the security world is a lack of expertise, particularly when it comes to sort of what is required from a security perspective in a virtualized or hyper-virtualized or shared infrastructure, and how do we need to assure compliance in that particular arena. Now, whether you're an enterprise or you're working in a public cloud, a lot of the same concepts apply. Now, the benefit of going to a cloud provider or using a cloud provider is that the cloud provider has the requirement that they've implemented some level of table stakes from a security perspective. So you can take advantage of those security controls as you sort of push your workload in, and you can ratchet up the type of security control that you implement in that environment depending on what you want. Meanwhile, you've taken advantage of a knowledge base that hasn't necessarily been available to you as an enterprise. So those are all important things that you can actually get from the cloud provider.
Well, thank you to our panel and to you, our viewers, for joining us today. Please look for the other videos in the series, and for information on cloud computing, turn to www.ibm.com/cloud. Thank you.